Hello, welcome to the first annual Moycullen Tolteca dunk contest. It is myself versus Connor Curran. Who do you think is going to win?
I would like to ask you, apart from the surroundings, the atmosphere that you can feel, that you can sense when you are playing on the court and in the stadiums, about the style, the basketball style, did you feel some differences, huge, little, between the American and the Irish or European basketball? About, for example, about the plays that you have, that the coach has to draw up, etc. Yeah, please explain to us.
For sure. Again, this is, I guess, a little bit more specific to Irish basketball. Like, I haven't had tons of experience outside of European basketball. It was kind of Irish basketball and then COVID for me. But there definitely were or are distinctions or differences coming from the American game. It just feels kind of like what it is, and the reality is that in Ireland it's a younger basketball nation. You know, basketball's only been on the island since like the 80s, and while basketball is like a relatively young sport everywhere in Europe, and I mean, comparing it to football and all the other sports, it's a relatively young game. It does feel a little bit younger in Ireland. That's not even to say that there aren't, you know, I played D3 in the US, and so the level of play varies greatly even within D3, and like I know some of the sets that I was running towards the end of my career, we would be watching the NBA and we'd be seeing those guys running the same sets. And so that sort of movement, especially like reading and reacting to the defense and what's going on, I mean, happens less, I would say, in my experience.
Okay.
And it does kind of tend to be, I mean, to make another NBA comparison, does kind of tend to be more like the playoffs in the NBA, and that's just kind of isolating our guy against the best defender, and if you get a stop, you get a stop, but it's just going to come down to, you know, how many buckets that I'm going to be able to put right on your head, and hopefully that's enough for us to win the game.
We move on to the next thing that I wanted to talk with you about, and it's like, so having basically the closest example that I can find is the Belgium. It's the basketball in Belgium. Basketball in Belgium, I think that little by little with players like Clint Capella or Thabo Sefolosha, I think that they are just examples that something is going on in that country. So what do you think about the progression? Which kind of direction do you think that basketball, Irish basketball, is going to have? Like, do you think that is progressing positively, little by little? Do you think that is getting bigger? Apart from the COVID thing, we could say until COVID thing. What do you think about the progression of Irish basketball?
That's a good question.
No, but and honestly.
But I mean, to be honest, I think it's hard to talk about this and not discuss kind of COVID and kind of the effects that it's had or going to have or will have. I think Irish basketball has certainly been progressing through like the youth national teams, even like the Superleague and Division 1 and all of that. It's certainly been progressing, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why players and coaches in Irish basketball now are pretty concerned about what's going on, because you have, I mean, obviously the Super League isn't happening right now, and you have, for the most part, every other top league in Europe is is playing in some capacity, and like as close to Ireland as UK basketball. They're playing and Ireland is not. So while there's certainly been progression throughout the years, I think the worry, the concern is that, one, the other countries are continuing to progress and grow the game while Ireland is kind of sidelined, and two, there might be some sort of lasting effect or kind of a drain of talent because, you know, the top players or the players that people want to, the talent that you want to bring into a country, you can't bring it in if there's no basketball. And you can't grow your own talent if you're not playing. And while there are certainly kind of health and safety concerns, and you really, at the end of the day, you have to put the virus first, and you can't have a league full of infected players and transmitting the virus here and there. Like the worry, I think, that people are concerned about is that you want to keep going. You know, you want to be gaining momentum, not losing it. Basketball, I think, is gaining traction in Ireland. And I think what needs to happen is support for that sort of grassroots kind of, you know, momentum's maybe not the way to put it, but you need to support that sort of idea that we're going to grow the game and kind of support youth sport and this and that. That really needs to you can't rely on under nines to kind of organize themselves and teach themselves the game. You kind of have to bring it to them in some way, shape, or form. So I feel like that's going to be
the next thing that I'm going to ask you about. But I absolutely agree in the sense that recently and after I made my research for talking about the mini guide that I made that I elaborated before about basketball in Ireland, I think that little by little the support is growing up. Before, at least until COVID moment, and hopefully in some moment they are going to realize the potential talent that they have in this country, and basketball is going to become more and more attractive. We'll see what happens, but I think that little by little is going to take, as you just said, it's going to take and grab more attraction. And the thing that I was going to ask you now is, like, if you were in charge, if you had the capacity and the responsibility and the opportunity to do something in order to make basketball in Ireland more interesting, stronger, to become this league in a professional and not in a semi-professional league, as you mentioned before, out of the cameras, and maybe giving it the opportunity to participate in European leagues as Eurocup or EuroLeague. So which kind of measures you think that are necessary to make Irish basketball bigger?
Yeah, I mean, first thing I would say is there's pretty good reasons why.
Mr. Palinka, please give us a little bit of knowledge.
But yeah, I think there's really kind of two options, in my opinion, and there's no real reason why you couldn't do both and at the same time. But realistically, to grow the game in a country, you can support it on a youth level and kind of really try to get young, to a certain extent, the talent pool in athletics in a country is kind of finite, you know, like you only have a certain number of players, you only have a certain number of athletes. It's kind of a matter of getting the best athletes to sort into the sport you support. And so for me, it's basketball. And in Ireland, you're really going to have to look at competing with the Gaelic games and rugby and football or soccer. And so, like I said, to kind of grow basketball, there's really two options, and that's, again, the kids, or you can pour money into the Superleague and try to get foreign talent to come and play and hope that when the kids see an American coming down the floor and doing a windmill dunk, they say, wow, like, that's the coolest thing ever. I'm going to want to do that. I'm not going to want to hurl or, I don't. You can see there are like another way that the game grows is that the culture of basketball gets bigger than any single country or any single kind of like targeted campaign or this and that. Like you can look at the effect that the 92 Olympics in Barcelona had, and I think that's kind of a huge event that really, really, really laid the groundwork or kind of sowed the seeds of growing European basketball. Was the Dream Team coming and Michael Jordan putting on the sweatsuit and the Ray-Bans or whatever and walking through Barcelona. Like that's just the coolest thing in the world, and there's no amount of money or like support for youth sports that's going to be as strong a force as MJ just looking like the baddest guy in the city, just really kind of like wearing the Nikes and getting mobbed by reporters and fans and this and that. I think that sort of thing also has a role in growing the game, and I think that sort of thing is able to happen a little bit more now. Like if you're a French basketball fan, odds are is you follow all your favorite stars on social media. And so whereas MJ was walking down the street to buy breakfast and get a coffee and getting mobbed by reporters, you can like see what your biggest idols are doing on a day-to-day basis that you couldn't see before. So the global reach of the game with the digital world is only growing, you know.
But you definitely touched one of the key with benchmarks, and definitely those events are really important, because the thing that you just said about Olympic Games in '92 in Barcelona, and what a surprise that 7-8 years later in Spain we found the best national team that we've ever had. Like before, basketball was okay in Spain, was kind of powerful, but after that moment, I think that young kids as Pau Gasol and Juan Carlos Navarro, etc., probably saw those people, and it was like a boost for them. So definitely, it's
exactly. It's I want that to be me. I want to do what he's doing. You know,
So definitely, I think you found the key, a mix between events, investment, foreign talent, and the combination of all of that. In some years, they can start growing some fruits. So definitely. Okay, Danny. So thank you very much. How do your family call you? Daniel or Daniel?
Daniel, I would say. My mom isn't Spanish, so she's when you ask me what does my family call me, I hear my mom yelling at me in my head, so that's Daniel.
Cool.
Sometimes if she's really mad, it's Daniel Enrique, but it's never. I don't really get. It's funny because I hate when the American accent calls me Danny. That doesn't feel like me, but somehow the Spanish Danny is like so much easier for me to go by. So
cool. So Danny, man, thank you very much for have participated in the video. You have thrown some knowledge over the table, and so just appreciate for having you here, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Good talking to you.